Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a ton of stuff to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and try to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic communities here on the YouTube space. With that all being said, remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's get right into today's episode. And coming off of NBA Media Day, things have slowed down a little bit as the fellas get settled into NBA training camp. So we got a bit of a quick hitter episode today, but nonetheless, a couple of things being discussed around the league that I think are important to take into consideration as we close in on NBA preseason. Let's start with Tyus Jones. Now, anybody who has paid attention to this podcast even a little bit since the beginning knows that I am one of the, if not the biggest Tyus Jones fan, probably the leader of the Tyus Jones fan club. And recently, NBA draft guru and I believe he's an analyst for The Athletic, Sam Vecini, spoke on his podcast, the Game Theory podcast, about the Orlando Magic when they were doing a preseason preview of the team. And one thing that he stated was that there aren't just many backup point guards in the league better than Tyus Jones. And although it's a very brief quote, it's one that stands out, right? Because first of all, the Orlando Magic have not had a player come off their bench that has been considered as a quote unquote top option off the bench in Lord knows how long. A six man of the year candidate style player. It's been a minute outside of maybe, 2 seasons ago there was buzz around Mo Wagner making a late season push for the possible opportunity, but let's be honest, in a league that tends to favor, points, rebounds, assists, Mo Wagner did a lot of the dirty work stuff that helped kind of boost the energy of the team, but not necessarily did things that showed up on the stat sheet in a way that was going to glare, right? That's why guys like Alex Caruso even don't earn six-man of the year honors as much as they probably deserve. Tyus Jones is one of the best backup point guards in the league. I think he's a top 30, top 35 point guard in the NBA. Yes, that's even factoring in some of these starters in the NBA. That's just how good I think he's been in this league, particularly when you go back to his time with the Memphis Grizzlies, where when John Morant was out, this guy kept them afloat and was a big catalyst to this team, that team being able to win 50 games on a handful of different occasions. So, of course, on this podcast, we're going to take any chance we can to glaze Tyus Jones in any way possible. Just have to throw that out there because of the fact that this guy is going to be so important to this team this upcoming year. And obviously, when you throw out the fact that this team's biggest deficiency, arguably their biggest deficiency last season outside of the three-point shooting itself, was depth at the point guard position beyond Jalen Suggs, Tyus Jones is going to be really, really important to this roster, and I'm glad that people are continuing to recognize how impactful he is, because backup point guard is not a position that's discussed a ton unless it's the six-man of the year race. But this is going to be a dude that I think is going to be much more productive than just being, quote-unquote, the best six-man in the NBA. Next up, let's talk about what Jamahl Mosley has expectations for when it comes to the offense. Of course, we know that Jamahl Mosley has hung his hat on the defensive end the last 3 to 4 seasons as his team has improved from one of the worst defensive units 3 or 4 years ago to the second best defense in the league last year statistically, and that's what he had to say, and he acknowledged that as well. He said, "We talked a lot this summer of our ability to convert, and now you have the number 2 defense in the NBA. You hang your hat on the defensive end, and our ability to get out in transition was higher. Our ability to convert is where we have to improve." So, excuse me, and so being able to hang our hat on a defensive end scale, but get out and push the pace faster in transition after you get those stops, after you get those scales, after you make those turnovers, we've got to make sure we finish on the other end. That's a long story short of saying this is a team that knows how proficient they can be on the defensive end. Again, he acknowledges we were a top 2 defense last year. Now we just need to learn how to put the ball in the basket when we get the ball back. This is one of the most inefficient offenses in the league last season. I think they were bottom 5 last year in particular. Bottom 5, bottom 6. Of course, they were hindered by injuries, but the other handful of years prior to that, again, we've mentioned it on the podcast a million times that they haven't had a top 10 defense since Dwight Howard. And more particularly in the last 4 to 5 years, they've been in the bottom 5 each of those seasons. So not even middle of the pack. This team knows what they can do defensively. With or without Jalen Suggs, even with Jonathan Isaac on a pitch count, they know what they're capable of defensively. We're at the point now, and Jamal Mosley is acknowledging, and I think that's very important, that it's brought up, is that this team now needs to learn how to take that defensive acumen and translate it on the offensive end into more efficient offense and then into more points. And he mentioned something that we talked about, I believe, last week a ton, about what can open up this offense more, and that's simply pushing the pace. Having guys like Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs take the ball and push the ball up court with more anticipation of trying to create opportunities out of the chaos that's created off of a rebounding situation, that's something that creates this easy look in the open floor, whether it's, again, flaring out to the three-point line, on the corners. Obviously, the three-man weave, as it was originally intended, two men on each side, cut to the basket, make good decision, finish around the basket, or draw the foul. Like, this is a team that has athletes. You go down the list and you think about how dangerous this team can be in the open floor when you think about the athletes: Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, Anthony Black, Tristan Silva, Goga Batazde even. I think when you go down the list of this team and you look at the athletes they have across the roster, like the fact that this team hasn't been playing faster as it is also is honestly kind of questionable when you think about it, because it's not taking advantage of a skill set that this team already naturally possesses, more particularly when you look at the fact that this team didn't have the kind of three-point shooting status that it has now, added by bringing in Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones and Jace Richardson, and hopefully Tristan De Silva has a big year shooting the three ball coming off a Euro basket, right? Like, now you have a handful of guys you can call shooters. But prior to that, that was your biggest weakness, and your way to alleviate that weakness is to stop allowing yourself to end up in half-court opportunities where now low-percentage three-point shooters are forced to take those shots in situations where they are highly contested, as opposed to playing more in transition where the contests are less likely, and you're honestly less likely to have to take a three-point shot while still being able to get a quick basket. So this is a team that I think, when you talk about the expectations for the offense, the biggest thing, the most important thing to start with is going to simply be playing faster. That's Jalen Suggs pushing the ball. That's Tyus Jones pushing the ball. That's Franz Wagner pushing the ball. But if this team can take advantage of the athleticism that they have, that alone will alleviate some of the pressure on the need to shoot the three ball so much, or the need to hit the three ball at such a high clip. And now that opportunity to shoot from beyond the arc gets distributed between the guys that you know are high leverage three-point shooters, as opposed to it all being kind of thrusted on an offense that's leaning heavily on trying to operate in the half court in tough situations. Next up, let's talk about the Magic center rotation. Obviously, this has been the biggest question of the summer for the Orlando Magic after they made their little small moves on the margins after the Desmond Bane trade. Excuse me. The center situation is the biggest question left. And it all kind of starts with Wendell Carter Jr. And we discussed that a little bit last episode. But Sports Illustrated put together an entire article kind of focusing on the idea of whether or not this Orlando Magic center rotation is going to be enough for being able to make a legitimate run in the Eastern Conference. And I'm pointing out a section that I think is kind of interesting. It says, They don't necessarily need this elite two-way center for them to compete among the best in the Eastern Conference. What they need is for their big men to allow the rest of their roster to fully optimize while contributing wherever they can. Take a look at teams like the Pacers or Rockets with Şengün Pacers or Rockets Şengün notwithstanding, who didn't have the flashiest big men. What they did have were bigs who starred in their roles. They had coaches who put them in the right spots and lineups that allowed the rest of the team to flourish. I think that's really important to factor in because I think I said this last episode when talking about Wendell Carter Jr. The Magic don't really need like an elite level setter. Like I know we keep bringing up Nikola Vucevic as a particular option. I know that I think we've discussed like Nicholas Claxton, Jakob Poeltl was discussed earlier on in the offseason as well as an interesting trade option. Like, we've had conversations about, like, maybe trying to bolster the center rotation up a little bit more. But the truth of the matter is that the center spot for the Orlando Magic actually has the least question marks as far as what they need to do in order for this team to be successful, right? Like, rebound the ball at a high clip, defend the rim, roll to the rim aggressively and finish around the basket. Finish hard. Like, I know it sounds very dumbed down, but like you have to look back at a team they didn't mention because it wasn't as prominent last season as it was 2 seasons ago. But another team they didn't mention was like the platoon system of the Dallas Mavericks with Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. Like, those two guys were not asked to do anything insane on that run to the NBA Finals. They were not asked to do anything crazy. Was Derek Lively a high level passer for a young center in this league during that run? Yes. He also was like arguably their third best player, simply as just a rim deterrent and a guy who rolled to the rim hard for Luka Doncic's lobs and finished at a high clip. Daniel Gafford had one of the best runs efficiency wise, shooting the ball where I think he went like 16 to 18 plus shots straight without missing a basket. High efficiency finishing. Not anything crazy, just rebound the ball, dunk, layup, finish at a high rate. Nothing crazy. And they went on a crazy run because they had arguably one of the best players in the NBA in Luka Doncic. You have Kyrie Irving in prime form at the time before he starts to get hobbled with injury. And you walk in with a guy like Derek Lively and the platoon system that was implemented by adding Daniel Gafford into the mix. And you now have yourself in a situation where you can go into any series and say, okay, we got one of the best players. We got one of the best duos in the NBA. And we have a defensive infrastructure built off of efficient rim rolling, rim defense, and guys who know how to operate in space in terms of guarding on the perimeter. So basically the center knows how to do the little things that translate. That's all the center rotation has to do. We have bigger questions about, can Paolo be more efficient? Can Franz, be a lead ball operator with the ball in his hands? We've seen it in stints, but can he be a guy who can truly lead an offense with the ball in his hands? Jalen Suggs, health concerns. We know what he is when he's healthy, but can he stay healthy enough to be a real contributor on his team? Desmond Bane, will some of the three-point shooting stuff from the Memphis Grizzlies years translate on this Orlando Magic team, given the fact that there's nobody on the Orlando Magic that puts pressure on the rim to open up the floor to the level that John Morant has done for Desmond Bane in the past? And you can make the argument that there's nobody else on the Orlando Magic that commands as much gravity as a three-point spacer at the big man position as Jaren Jackson Jr. did, right? So the Desmond Bane element even has its own question mark as to how he's going to slide into this offense, playing next to Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, who need the ball a little bit more between the two of them, compared to John Morant and Triple J, who not only needed the ball a little less in order to be effective across the board, but also were two guys that created a certain level of gravity both inside and out, as opposed to Paolo and Franz, who dominate most of their on-ball touches in terms of creating offense in the paint, which obviously sucks the defense in, brings things closer, which can create spacing in its own right. But we have to see what that looks like, given the fact that Paolo and Franz have never played next to multiple high-level shooters. They've kind of only had Jalen Suggs as like a guy who's 40% better at shooting from beyond the arc. They had KCP, and he completely fell off a cliff in terms of being able to do so. Now, you have a handful of guys that are career, 37 plus beyond the arc shooters, and you hope that Tristan Da Silva and Jace Richardson also come into the fray with that as well. What does that look like now that you have to learn how to play next to guys that you have to create openings for, as opposed to playing with guys who, when you create collapses, they're almost unusually thrown into situations of having to shoot the three ball, even though they know they're not high level 3-point shooters. So there's more questions around some of the other situations on this roster than the center rotation. The center rotation of Wendell, Goga, and to a lesser extent Jonathan Isaac literally just need to come in there and do the most simplest center requirements, I guess you could say, for this team, because everyone else, their roles are well clearly defined, and the question is just whether or not they can step within those, proficiently. But the center role, is the most translatable from college to the NBA that you get. It might be one of the easiest positions to pick up when you come from college to the NBA, because the way you can stamp yourself, and again, I use the Derek Lively example as one that I think translates well for this, is come in, roll to the rim hard, finish at the basket at a high rate, block shots, rebound. And you're good. You're already an anchor for a top 2 defense in the league. Just be that. Just be that, and just be a little bit more efficient around the rim, and you do wonders for what this team looks like moving forward. Last but not least, let's talk about CBS Sports. They ranked their top 7 duos, and the Orlando Magic duo of Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero was left just outside of that top 7. But based off the way they labeled their honorable mentions, it looks as though they were ranked 10th. Some of the interesting names that were in the top 7: Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. Understandable. Donovan Mitchell's coming off of an All-NBA season. Evan Mobley just won DPOY. Steph Curry and Draymond Green, I thought was a pretty interesting one to still crack the top 7, given the fact that, Steph Curry is slowly but surely regressing, and Draymond Green is more of a defensive anchor, but somebody that kind of has really lost his touch as a two-way player compared to where he's been in the past. LeBron James and Luka Doncic, obviously I can understand why they're still thrown in there, given the fact that LeBron James just made 3rd-team All-NBA, and a lot of people think that Luka Doncic is primed for a MVP caliber season this upcoming year, given his slimmed down and a full training camp with the Los Angeles Lakers organization. Some other names that came just before Paolo and Franz: Kevin Durant, Amen Thompson, as well as Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox. I think there's a real competition there between Paolo and Franz versus De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama. We'll see what that looks like this upcoming season. I feel like that duo might be getting dragged a little bit by the fact that people believe in Victor Wembanyama so much. For example, we talked about ESPN putting Vic as a top 5 player in the NBA 3 seasons into his career, where he hasn't played 82 games a single season since, in either of his first 2 years in the league. Kind of a questionable state, but I'll read exactly what they have to say about Paolo and Franz as a duo. It says, "We only got to see them together for 40 games last season. The team had a plus 3.8 net rating in the minutes they shared on the court. Orlando is poised for elite this season, but needs this duo to stay healthy and take a step forward together." And that's the crux of it. This team has, arguably, I think in my personal opinion, I think they have a top 7 duo in the league. The guys that I think they're in competition with for those spots, if we're being realistic, I think that they have a real good bone to pick with a duo like Steph Curry and Draymond, as I mentioned before. I think they have a good bone to pick with guys like Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. I think they have a good bone to pick with James Harden and Ivica Zubac, who was last on that list of the top 7. They literally were the 7th team in the group. So This is a team that arguably has a top 5, top 7 duo in the NBA already. It's all just going to come down to health, and it's going to come down to the efficiency of Paolo and the aggressiveness offensively of Franz Wagner, particularly as a shooter, but I think more than ever needs to be his ability to be more aggressive as a guy attacking with the ball in his hands on a consistent basis. This is a team that is relying on these two guys to obviously be healthy, as the article mentions before, but two guys that, if they're going to be considered real NBA championship contenders this season, because a lot of people have high expectations for them to be a team that makes real noise in the Eastern Conference. These two guys need to make the All-Star team. They need to be on the trajectory towards being All-NBA, and they need to be guys that particularly you can trust to close games in the clutch. Because as a young Magic team, the ability to learn how to finish out games is going to be an important translation against teams like the Knicks, who have played in many high leverage situations with Jalen Brunson at the helm, who was clutch player of the year last year, ironically. They played a lot of big time minutes, big time games last season in the postseason. They're going to be looking, if a handful of those games go a different way, the Knicks are the ones playing in the NBA Finals last year, right? The Cleveland Cavaliers are a team that is folded under the pressure of not being able to finish out games in the postseason. That's something to learn from. Like, to get out of the Eastern Conference, I don't think it's going to be about trying to like bridge the talent gap. I think Orlando is as talented as anybody else in the Eastern Conference right now that you would consider as a real contender. The bigger question now is becoming a more efficient offense and being a team that can finish down the stretch despite their youth. They're still a very young team, but if these expectations are going to be met, if the expectations they have for themselves are going to be met, it's going to start and end with being able to beat good teams both on national television and on the road and winning in clutch time. So, and a lot of those things, of course, are relying on Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner. But with that all being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that post notification bell so you know that we're dropping new episodes every single day. I will see you guys again tomorrow, but until then, peace.